this process when done legitimately is known as flashing. That means, time to time your firmware has to be updated, is not it? So, we actually do that, and that is stolen by the attacker, and it is called now flashing. That means, if when we do it, that means when we update our firmware legitimately using the keys or something that we have at our hand. So, that is a legitimate thing. So, it is called flashing, and other, that means when somebody else does it on your behalf without even knowing, without even your knowledge. So, it is called the attack, and it is called therefore PHLA, flashing. So, PDUS is a pure hardware targeted attack, and so it can be much faster because it is affecting the firmware. Reflection attack. Reflection attack is a method of attacking a challenge response authentication system. Okay. I am not going upon the last phrase of this sentence just now. Challenge response authentication system is a very much used, widely practiced system. What is it? In very simple terms, you can think of this to be, say, you answer some secret questions even after providing your password when you register for the first time, remember? So, there are some questions, you answer them and you know that these will be stored in the database. Okay. Now, and when there is something difference, then the server may ask you, what was your secret question, do you remember it? Then choose it and provide the answer. So, the server will then check it against the stored one. So, this is the simple mechanism that can depict the idea behind challenge response. Challenge and response, obviously the terminologies are very simple. Somebody is throwing you a challenge and you are responding to it with some response of your own. But obviously, if that response is not known before, then how does the challenger validate your response? You understand? That means, you are asking a question to say x, x is giving some answer. So, if you do not have x's answer stored beforehand, how do you know that this is x giving the correct answer? Is not it? So, you are the challenger here. So, you throw a challenge to a user and the user responds with a response. So, in the challenger database, that original response of the responder should be there to indicate that this recent response is also the same, therefore, it is the same user. Okay. Now, say in challenge response what happens is that basically the user may not have any idea at all what is happening, because all this is being done by some algorithm, right, with some secrets generated from your answers. Here maybe the passwords, something is some algorithm is executed on your password and something, and that is kept with the challengers database. That means, maybe the server, because you are logging into a server. So, in the server's database, some response of yours to what challenge is also kept, because there may be several challenges, question 1, question 2, question 3, like that. So, there may be several challenges. So, several answers. Now, if the server has some doubt, next time you log in, it will throw you a challenge. If you are the actual user, original user, you will respond back with the same response. Okay. And here that is what I am telling, it is not as simple as question answer. It may be something that the user, at the user level you do not know, but the client machine, it is doing some performing against some algorithmic execution and sending back some result. So, that result is already stored in the database of the server and matched. Okay. So, how this is being used? You see now the second phrase that uses the same protocol in both directions during the attack technique. Okay. So, that is the same challenge response protocol is used by each side to authenticate the other side. So, how does this happen? We will see. The essential idea of the attack is to trick the target into providing the answer to its own challenge. So, the attack outline is like this. The attacker initiates a connection to some target A. Now, obviously, the target A will attempt to authenticate. So, it throws a challenge, but the attacker does not know the answer to the challenge, is not it? But the attacker knows that A will, because the attacker has posed as somebody to A, right, that I am B talking with you. So, A from its database with respect to B will choose up a challenge and send it, okay? Because if the challenge is correctly responded, then the A, that means the target A will accept this, but this is the attacker. Okay. Attacker does not have any idea about the response. So, what it does? Just like parallel session, you remember, it opens up another connection with B. So, the attacker opens another connection to target B and sends the target B this challenge as its own. No problem, that this is the challenge that has come. Target B unknowingly obviously will answer back to the challenge. So, the response is with now the attacker, which it simply passes on to the A. Okay. So, target B responds to the challenge, the attacker sends that response back to the target on the original connection. So, now B will be just ignored, because the connection has been established between the target and the the attacker and the target A, what the attacker wanted, and the target A will think that I am talking with B. Okay. And even if not B, if the challenge response actual mechanism, it may not be B, it may be say some valid user, okay, because generally the challenge response algorithms work on some hash algorithm over your password or something like that. So, whatever password you provide, it simply encrypts with again another layer with something, and hence if you type in your original password, then you do not have to do anything, the algorithm will change it to the response and sends it back. So, even you may not know what is happening in the beneath. Okay. So, this reflection denial of service attacks generally use a potentially legitimate third party component to send the attack traffic to a victim. So, as if the attacker is choosing B to send the attack traffic to the target A. Okay. It hides the attacker's own identity in the process, obviously, because A understands that everything is coming from B. The attackers send packets to the reflected servers. Before that, I must say that these A and B, so one of them will be server. You can think that one of them is a server and the other is a client. Okay. It is not only a peer to peer network, it may be a server client network. So, any server can be targeted like this. I mean that is the attacker's behavior. That means, you can think that the attacker is thinking, I mean posing itself as superior to this B to B. That is why it is as if sending the challenge that I am the server, you please give me back. That is what. That is why these servers are coming in over here. That means, it may not be as simple like that. The name of the attack is reflection service attack, reflection server attack. I mean, you will get it in different terminologies. It may throughout the network, I mean generally same network, because actually just let me see if I have that. I do not have that slides, but basically here the servers which are targeted are DNS servers. Okay. So, they will I mean span through the different networks also. What happens is that I am simply telling you just an example sort of that DNS actually resolves the addresses, is not it, gives you back the URL. So, what happens if I give some name? So, the DNS server will try its level best to resolve that, is not it. So, it will I mean firstly the my request has to travel over there and the DNS will exhaust all its resources. It will look up to that gateway, it will tell that, it will tell its subordinates, everybody, and generally it is a recursive also. This searching is recursive also. Okay. Otherwise, if it is non-recursive, then the attack will be limited, okay, up to the DNS only. So, on one network. If this is recursive, that I know or I do not know, result is sent back, okay, cannot be much further replicated or something like that. But if it is recursive, then everybody is involved, everybody trying to send answer. So, ultimately the network is flooded. That is an example of this reflection attack. So, servers here, because DNS servers nobody thinks that they will be targeted. So, many a times it so happens they are not much guarded also. That is the, I mean it may be our fault, but that is the case. So, here the attacker sent packets to the reflector servers. So, this server may be anybody with a source IP address set to their victim's IP, therefore, indirectly overwhelming the victim with response packets. So, if the server is a DNS server with recursive call, then everybody will be sending answer back to everybody else. Okay. That will become the problem. The reflector servers used for this purpose could be ordinary servers, not obviously compromised, which makes this kind of attack particularly difficult to mitigate. So, it can be your organization server also. Okay. And therefore, many a times it so happens that somebody from within the organization is involved in such an attack. Okay. So, common example of for this is the reflective DNS response attack. Defense techniques for, I mean a general defense techniques here. So, firstly obviously, you have to detect the attack and then you have to classify the traffic, and mean not then, I mean these are the things that you have to do. Traffic classification in the sense that means whether it is normal, whether it is out of the way, whether it has crossed the threshold of being normal, between whom, okay, everything. Response tools you have to keep handy. Commonly used are firewalls. Have you seen the usage of firewall? You can write down rules over there that block this, block that, etc. May add rules that denies all incoming traffic based on originating IP, port, etc. That means, you can think that we are having some firewall sort of thing when we detect something as spam in our mail, I mean in our mail server, if we say that this is spam. So, that will be blocked like that. So, kind of firewall you can say. Of course, it will trigger some rule in the background, that is why. Switches, you have seen switches all over, I think in your colleges and college networks. Okay. So, some switches generally have rate limiting and ACL capability. So, what is ACL capability? And some switches provide with automatic or wide rate limiting, traffic shaping, delayed binding, deep packet inspection, bogon filtering facilities, but all switches do not provide this. Obviously, some of the switches provide this, because the rest, that means traffic shaping, delayed binding, deep packet inspection and bogon filtering may not be bogus IP filtering. That means, if the IP address is from some set which is actually not in the network range, that is bogon IP address. Okay. Find it out. So, that means, you have the policy, authorization policy. Okay. That means, whom will you give what access, how much. Okay. So, since this is switch, so it will be from a upper level sort of thing, I mean. Okay. So, it may identify some addresses, IP addresses to which it will provide access. Rate limiting, what is that? Traffic shaping, this is more or less associated with the quality of services in a network. Okay. That means, you can tell in the sense, you can write down as part of rules or other things, how many bytes, how many packets will be coming, what will they look like, all these things, what type of packets may come. Okay. These things may be specified. Delayed binding is also called TCP splicing. What is that? Have you heard about that? It is not in use nowadays, that is why may not be very. Remember that C in ACK protocol, TCP protocol part, the SYN and the ACK that we just discussed. So, binding means TCP establishing connection. So, port will be assigned, remember. So, delayed binding in the sense, that means maybe you can say the last step. I mean, generally speaking, you may think that all other steps or handshaking are completed, then just the step before data transmission starts. Okay. Simply speaking, there are many technological, I mean references for this. I mean, how technically you will do this, okay, splicing activities, but splicing activities, okay, even if you do not know, no problem. Deep packet inspection, you inspect the packet deeply, right, but how do you know? Checking the different headers, whether all parts are there, right. So, the logically seen flood may be prevented by using TCP splicing. Okay. So, content based denial of service may be prevented using deep packet inspection. Content based means if something is there in the message, but obviously you cannot read the actual payload. Okay. So, you have to determine it with some other headers or something. Suppose the checksum is not there or it is not okay. So, I mean this is just an example I am telling. So, it has to be treated like that. Attacks originating from dark addresses or going to dark addresses. Dark means that Bogon filtering part, that means, and automatic rate filtering works as long as set rate thresholds have been set correctly and granularly. What does that mean? That means rate limiting means that how many packets say per some time unit you will allow, and not only how many packets, what are the sizes of the packets. At each layer the packets are having their headers added, remember. So, basically the number of packets may increase or decrease depending on whether you are coming down or going up. Okay. So, rate limiting means, that means there is some capability of this switch, some connections are there. So, you can program how much, how many packets this may be received and or I mean transmitted or received by such within per unit time. So, all of you are having some knowledge about cryptography? Yes. No problem. So, you know what is public key cryptography and what is symmetric key cryptography. So, can you generate the keys? Okay, you will in some session. I will give you some programming assignments. Okay. Symmetric key uses same key for encipherment and decipherment, as you all know, and public key cryptography, one of the keys would be publicly known, whereas the other would be private. But there is obviously another I mean consideration that must be kept in mind, must be computationally infeasible to derive the private key from the public key, because since the public key is available. So, everybody may think that I can derive the private key also from the public key for some other person, okay, because there is a relationship between the public private pair of one node, okay. But obviously, it has to be computationally infeasible. That means, computationally infeasible means, that means given the time limit, resources and other things, you may not be able to come back to the exact pair of public and private. So, crypto system is a 5 tuple EDMKC, where M is the set of plain texts, K is the set of keys, C is the set of ciphertext, and E is the set of enciphering functions, and D is the set of deciphering functions. Okay. So, and this K, since it is the set of keys, so it may be different for different types of crypto system. Okay, no problem. So, we can go to the next. Authentication, we have also talked about authentication. So, user authentication, as you can see that it proves the continuity in relationship. That means, if the user is valid, user registered for the registered till date, I mean registration in the first time, and till date is a valid user, it is authenticating. So, obviously, a trust forms between the user and the system, and the user can be thought about to be the trusted user of the system, and here user I am not always referring to say some I mean human user like this, it can be an object, an entity user also. So, obviously, their work in the system will be trusted. Trust in the sense, that means then you can, you in the sense the process that you are running can take the information from that other process to be the correct information. Why? Because that has already proved itself to be a trusted entity in the system, that is why. And this trust may be formed, I mean not only through say some sort of authentication like login ID, password, tokens, etc. It can also be I mean evaluated through the different activities that are performed in the network. Like say for example, a message will go from sender A to receiver B through intermediate hops. Whether the intermediate hops are acting as they should, like a relayer. Intermediate hops are nothing but relayer, okay? They will simply relay the message. So, somebody may become malicious at sudden I mean all of a sudden it can become malicious. So, then it may drop the message, okay? So, the receiver will not get it, but therefore, that means and when this is detected that the message is getting dropped at some end, some I mean some intermediate hop. So, obviously, the trust for that intermediate hop will go down. So, next time you will choose some alternative route which does not involve that particular hop. So, that is how trust can be I mean gathered, evaluated, reevaluated in the course of time from the network activities itself, because if it becomes malicious, it will not only drop your packet, it will drop others packets also. And obviously, authentication why we are mentioning this, many a times this physical authentication, that means where you are, is also very very important, okay? Because I think you may have also faced it. I mean if you log in from some different device in your mail server, some mail comes, warning mail, that. So, that means here physical authentication where you are, this where may be your device, your recognized browser that from where you work, all these may be included. That is also very very important. For example, an attacker, say for example, a user has gone malicious, say some in a system, okay? And generally that user always uses his device from the office. But now after he has gone malicious, since it can be accessed, say the office VPN can be accessed from outside also through some secure network, he is accessing it from some other locations which is not office, not his home, and etc. Then of course, you can get to know. That is why all these different information are important. Who you are, so biometrics nowadays, as you know, what you have. We are coming to this because the next protocols that we will talk about use this, and what you know, I mean what information do you have, like those secret questions. So, generally two-way authentication in a network means that server trusting the user is not the only concern, user may also must trust the server. That means, server therefore has to provide some credentials which will make the user believe that it is a trusted server. So, variety of solutions in user applications, what does that mean? This means that say for example, I have say user is accessing an online bank account. You may not be aware till now, because you may not be using your bank account online like that, but many a times you will find that you can just simply see your account and not being able to perform transactions on it. Okay. Suppose you have two types of accounts in your bank. One is the plain and simple savings bank and the other is the say FD, some fixed deposit. Basically, you are not supposed to do some online transactions on your FD, because it is fixed deposit, it has a term, it has something else, but the other savings bank you may. Okay. So, in the same application, banking application, you have these different types of solutions. Therefore, the user, when you log in, you will also be provided with whatever you are permitted to do, and that may be a token, that may have a validity and so on and so forth. So, password based authentication is the simplest form, as you know. So, the important is that means many a times some initial password is given, okay, and that initial password is generally this last name etcetera whatever. It is a very simple approach and it works well with us, but the flip side is that we may tend to go on with this password, okay. That should not be done. So, these are storing passwords, how passwords will be stored. I am not going into all these details. Remember, we were thinking about, we are talking about challenge response mechanisms. So, there I told you that something may be computed from your passwords. Okay. So, here is the that direction, that passwords may be used as keys and how. One time passwords are also there, as you all know nowadays. These are some of the very simple, but effective hash algorithms used. We are not going into the details of all these. What I want to tell you is that these things, that means for cryptographic authentication, what you require? You may have token, you may have smart card, all these use some cryptographic methodologies, okay. And you can use a password which may serve as a key, but you have to prove that the key is in possession with you, and generally mutual authentication will take place. And mutual authentication, when this particular terminology comes in, then we generally use certificates, okay, digital certificates I mean. So, and I will come into this, usually coupled with encryption of data after authentication. I am coming to this point later on. KDC means the key distribution center. Why is it required? Because you see that we were telling about public key which may be available to everybody. So, who will distribute the public key? Somebody may be there. So, there may be a key distribution center, we can think of that. But key distribution center can impersonate any node, or it can be a single point of failure, and basically it will be a potential bottleneck because it is single, right. So, these are the problems of key distribution center. Hence, we may have some certificate authority. Why? Because again here also one point is that there may be one central point for certificates, or there may be more than one certificate providing authorities. But even if there are more than one or a single one, all users in the network must know them, that this is the CA certification authority, isn't it? For example, if you come to me with a certificate from your college with the principal sign on it, I will believe it, right, because your principal signed, because I know that he is a competent certification authority. So, the same thing is applicable for network users also.